Hello and welcome to a Cloud Developer channel. In the last video I showed you how to take the application that we started building using Angular and how do we separate the logic into multiple subcomponents to make it easier for us to maintain the application as well as do some unit testing of the actual application itself. And in this video what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the process of updating the unit tests that we had, in the current state that they're in. Let's take a look and make sure that they're actually working correctly and fix them if there's any adjustments that are required. So what we have right now is our running application, and everything is fully functional. And I can go ahead and click on the show modal, and everything shows up. We see the footer, we see the header content, and everything seems to be functional. Let's go open up PowerShell, and this is prior execution of our unit test that we had before. So let's go ahead and run it again and see what state it's in right now. So you execute it by running ng space test, and this will actually execute the Karma unit testing framework, and it will execute the specific unit test that we had created before, as well as any adjustments that were made to it. So the first thing you'll notice is that we actually have some failures here. So we have 6 specs and 4 failures. So if we click on the spec list, we'll see that the app component as well as the application content component are actually failing. Now let's take a quick look to see why it's failing. So let's go ahead and click on this should create the app. And you'll notice that the first thing it tells you is the app-application header is not a known element. And the reason for that is because we actually need to go ahead and update and let our testing framework know that there is an application header component, because all of the tests are actually written in isolation, at least to get started with. And now we need to start updating it to let it know that we're referencing other components. So the unit test was for the app component itself, and if we go to this component, you'll see that we have an import statement for the app component itself, and then we begin to do the unit testing for that component. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and comment out of this section where it checks should render the title in the h1 tag, because if you remember, we actually removed this from the app component and we moved it to the application content component. So this is no longer valid in this particular section of our testing. Now what we do want to do, however, is we want to actually import the other components that we know that our app component is now implementing. And so we'll go ahead and just add a couple of statements here, and we'll start importing those components in here. So we're gonna do dot space application header slash an application header component. So as soon as we did that, we should be able to reference that application header component here. So actually, if we go ahead and replace this, we'll put in content, we'll put in footer, update the folder names to where they're coming from, and update the actual names of the components as well. So I have those components imported, and the next step is we need to reference these components inside of the declaration here. So I'll go ahead and specify content, and then I'll specify the footer. Okay, so all of these components have been imported, and if I go ahead and run this again, still we see failures. And if we go back to this, we'll actually notice that it is also requiring us to make sure we have the app user notification component. So let's go ahead and actually import it right here. And I'll change this to user notification, and I'll add it right after the application content component. As soon as I hit save, now we see only one failure. And if we go back here, we see that now the app component initialization logic is actually working correctly. And the only thing that's now not functioning correctly is the application content component itself. And let's go take a look at that. And if you notice that it's also complaining about the app user notification, that it's not a known element, and the reason is because, again, it needs to know about the user notification component itself. So let's go ahead and actually copy this line here where we import the user notification component, and we're going to go to the application content folder and update the actual specification file for the application content component. So in here, it basically looks almost the same as the main application file, except there's some minor differences. It looks like in its syntax between what the generator created for us initially and the actual generator generated later for us when we actually created the component. So the other change we need to actually do is, because it's context aware or folder aware, it doesn't need to know about this subfolder because we're referencing the file from the same place. And so it's user notification component, and again, we'll need to add it to the declaration section here. And as soon as we do that, we should be able to go ahead and save this and update. And as you can see, we have 5 specs and 0 failures, so everything is working correctly. Now, we're not done yet, so what we want to do next is we want to actually go back to the app component TS file. App component spec TS file. And we want to move this particular test here from this file here to our application component test logic. So we do that by going to that test file here. I'll just paste it down the bottom, and I'll go ahead and uncomment this section. I'll format it a little bit. Now this is where the difference comes in. Here I actually just copy and pasted the particular test for the app component, or from the app component file. But also one of the differences that in this new spec file, we actually have a fixture that's already defined. And in this unit test here, it's actually complaining that, well, first of all, the variable is already there. Plus, we're not even referencing the right type. So we actually don't need this here. The reason being is because it's defined at the top of the actual spec file. So now we'll go ahead and save this and go back, and now we see a failure, and let's take a look at why. So you'll notice that it says expect welcome to space channel exclamation point, and what it sees is welcome to clouddeveloper.io channel. And basically well, this is actually what it's expecting. What it's seeing is this value here. It's missing the actual clouddeveloper.io. And the reason for that is because it's not running within the context of the application itself. It's running within the context of that component, which means that nothing actually told this application content component to initialize and pass in the variable into the actual component template. So the value that it gets is missing this particular string that we need. In order to fix that, we actually need to tell the component itself that's being initialized at the top to set the value. And the way you do that is by going to the actual definition of that specific test, and we'll add another line, and it will be component dot title. And basically what we're saying is, just like in our HTML template, we actually passed in the actual variable here. However, we're going to just give it the actual value. So we're going to say clouddeveloper.io, and we'll close this. And then the next line says fixture, go ahead and detect any changes that were done to that component, so that next time it actually gets compiled, which gets done right here, the actual HTML gets produced correctly, and then the actual expect function looks at the output of that HTML, and it should notice that now the value is present and the value matches everything that we were expecting. So I'll go ahead and save this and rerun this, and you can see now that the actual test succeeded. So now not only did we actually move all of the tests in the right places, we've also updated the unit test to match what the expectation was, and everything is working the way it's supposed to be. So you can actually see all the data that is expected and being generated. So this is the basics of how you actually start using your unit tests in order to ensure that the changes you're making to the application are actually valid and you're not breaking anything functionally. So if we start adding unit tests here to make sure that our show modal button is shown up correctly, that it has the right value, this is going to start ensuring that your application functionality doesn't change as you begin to move content from one file to the next. Hopefully this was useful. If you have any questions or you want to leave a comment about this video, feel free to put it in the comment section below. If you have any questions about the functionality of this, go ahead and provide your comments as well, and I'll answer them the best I can. And hopefully you enjoyed this video. Feel free to subscribe to the channel, and I will talk to you later.